Hi Breed family, my name is Saj and today I'm here with Nathan, Head of Programs at Breed. Nathan, would you like to tell us a bit about your role here?
Sure. Thank you, Saj, for that introduction and for having me have this conversation with you today. So my name is Nathan Burbridge and I'm the Head of Programs here at Breed Australia Inc. For those that don't know me, my background is in government and social policy and trying to work out ways in which we can make progressive change to improve the lives of people across the spectrum. I've done that for over 25 years in different ways, but in more recent years I've committed my passion and purpose to supporting young people and working with them directly, and I'm particularly interested in the ones that are either overlooked, have challenges within their own environments, or are often underestimated and feel a little bit left out. So each day I'm inspired and I get up motivated to do something to change the lives of people in those situations. My job here, or my role here as the head of programs, is to look at ways we can deliver programs for people like this that has a material benefit. So we're an alternative education provider who designs programs. The last thing I would say is that in designing these programs, we're doing it beside young people. We're not doing it as though we know all. So that's my role.
Nathan, can you paint a picture of the mental health crisis that we face in Australia today?
I certainly can, and I'll start with a few sobering statistics. What we know from our various research and what's in the public realm is that 40% of people aged 16 to 24 are experiencing some kind of mental health challenge or an illness. What we also know is, comparing that to around 20 years ago, or 2007, that number was only 26%. So there's an increase there that is of concern. We know specifically that nearly over 45% of young women themselves are experiencing the same, so it's at a higher rate compared to the median. And we also know, if we step away from the issue strictly of young people, a recent report just in the last fortnight is indicating that in the workplace, 81% of Australian workers are experiencing stress and burnout in their careers. So there's something definitely happening in the context of why are people feeling, what we think is, why are they feeling overwhelmed? Why are they struggling with their resilience, and how can they overcome it in a real and practical way? And at Breed, I just want to make it clear that we're not a clinical-based organisation. We're an alternative education provider who focuses on mental health, which is around early intervention, and I'll get into why that is. Primarily, what we know is that in the current environment, in the setting by which young people live, they're overloaded, they're not fragile. How are they overloaded? They're overloaded because they've got the stimulus of social media. They're forever on public display through that social media environment. That has led to unintended consequences of loneliness and isolation, despite all the machinery and technology supports that they have. They're exposed to academic comparisons from the age of 8. If we use NAPLAN, and I don't want to be critical of the education system, but that exposure at the age of 8 does have consequences. So that kind of pressure and expectation is set in from a very early age. And so what's really happening, and if I compare it to myself, I'm a Gen X, without giving my age, but I'm a Gen X, and therefore my parents are baby boomers. And that level of exposure and complexities, while there was always these challenges for young people, it's the saturation of them, the level of stimulus, and that has consequences in a neuroscience way on the brain. And this is meaning that young people are experiencing mental health challenges far, far earlier than people of previous generations have ever before. At Breed, we're very conscious of that broader macro level of what's actually happening and why we believe alternative education to deal with the 16 to 25-year-old crisis is so necessary, because our concerns are, well, if there's going to be a crisis now and my generation and baby boomers experience it later in life, what's to say there won't be two waves? To be able to confront the challenges they face now, but prepare them for facing them should they occur in the future. And part of what we do, and the primary topic that I want to talk about is Breed Australia's first social impact report. It dives very heavily into the method by which we apply our Learning for Good framework to try and use tools to have them change their mindset in a practical way. This is the first time where Breed Australia has prepared a social impact report that looks at our 11 programs and starts to measure both the programs themselves and an aggregate of what are where are we seeing improvements or where are we seeing differences in people's emotional well-being, their level of confidence, their clarity on their goals through the tools that we use in our programs. And do they, importantly, because we know going back to mental health challenges, do they feel more connected with themselves, with others and the broader community?
Can you give us an overview of what Breed Australia set out to do in 2024 to 2025 and how that shaped the social impact report?
That's a good question. More and more, we've always been in the business of alternative education. Historically, that's centred around programs that concentrated on creating employment pathways for young people. And we still do that, and we're still motivated to do that. But where we've shaped and where we've adjusted is coming back to those earlier statistics that I spoke to. We realised that we weren't doing enough in the foundational areas that allowed people to believe in the shift they needed to make. Through the past programs we delivered, we always tried to motivate them, but we never necessarily gave them the tools to shift that mindset to believe in themselves. We certainly didn't do enough of it. So what we've done is we've changed our emphasis and our programs over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've worked in different capacities to improve them, is that all our programs are early intervention mental health based. We've put much more time and energy in our programs to build what it is to have a good mindset, what emotional regulation looks like, how do you deal with that fright or flight mentality, how do you reframe your thoughts, and how do you practice that every day in the pursuit of your goals or your purpose. It's reshaped our social impact reporting because rather than, as I said before, reporting on the outputs of, how we help people, we're now reporting on what changes happen to them from a behaviour, a mindset, and a true belief in themselves. Over the last year, we've dealt with 497 individuals through the various programs that we have. And what we can report is that, again, what are we measuring? We're measuring the change in themselves. Our aggregate score, and we do have measurements individually on programs, but what we can share is an incredible 87% feel more confident. 74% feel stronger connections to their community and to others. And I think the one that stands out for me and the one that excites me most is that they feel they have more direction. They feel for the first time that they're not only heard, that they're not only seen, but it's given them more purpose and direction, and they can focus. So they can ignore the noise around them, the feelings of overloadedness, and come back to their core, be centered, be grounded, and stay their course of what their personal goal may be.
Could you tell us what's driving these outcomes and how Breed's approach actually works?
Of course I can. Thank you for the question. Breed's programs are really two parts. So we've delivered, I think I've said before, 11 programs this year. What are those programs been in? They've been supporting women in trades complete their apprenticeships. We've done programs for those that might be in the juvenile justice setting. We've done programs for young people, wanting to embark on small business. We've done programs in the school environment, particularly for those transitioning between year 6 and 7 and 9 to 10. What underpins all of these programs, regardless for how long they run for, is the first 4 to 6 weeks is not about the material tool that we use to help a young woman stay in an apprenticeship, or a young person in a juvenile setting to reshape their purpose. We spend the first 4 to 6 weeks solely on our mindset first discussions and education. So what does that look like? We call it learning for good, but what does it mean in practice? In theory, it draws on academic research and approaches to education on emotional intelligence by people like Goldman, growth mindset by Dwork, and trauma-informed education from Perry and Hammond, who all have a clinical and psychology counselling background. But our learning for good is really starting at the basis around thought processes. And in an overwhelmed environment, what are our thought processes like and how can we reframe them? We need to take that learning, that 4 to 6 weeks, and apply it into a real life setting. And that's essentially what the Learning for Good model, it's got a lot more elements to that, and that's why it lasts 4 to 6 weeks. And, in theory could last longer, but it's built into the mentoring at the end of the program. So we keep going through and building those habits, because ultimately if you train your mind, in a more constructive way, and you adjust the neuroscience that's taking place in an overwhelmed body, particularly when you're a young person, you're not fully matured yet. We're taking important steps to rewire the brain and then apply it in practice.
Building on that, from a donor's perspective, how does a contribution translate into real change? For example, what does $1,000 look like on the ground?
Well, we would welcome any donors that believe and recognise, whether it's through their own personal experiences with their own child, with their grandchildren or their nieces and nephews or people in their own community, where they realise that mental health and mental challenges are affecting a whole generation. And if we don't do something about it, it's only going to get worse. Anybody who feels that they can make a difference and they can contribute because of our belief that something needs to be done now, it needs to be done earlier than it's been done before, and that anything that is done can have a material benefit that will not just help them in their current situation, but might help them 10 or 20 years from now. Why they should donate? Look, it's because fundamentally we ensure that the person's seen and heard. We meet them where they're at. We don't try and make assumptions. We don't try to influence or direct them in certain ways. We meet them where they're at, and most importantly, before they're about to break. That hence the early intervention. To make a $1,000 donation, look, it'd be very simple. A $1,000 donation is simply going to allow one participant to access our 6-week mindset and emotional regulation phase of our Learning for Good program. So if nothing else, we're going to get to the heart of how they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and how they can take steps to effectively retrain the way they think and help them better understand their emotions and regulate them better before they then discover what their purpose and goal achievement is. What does $1,000 contribute to? It contributes to the facilitators who are expertly trained in counselling, a mindset, personal coaching, provides materials and access for the content of that information. And we have that mentoring and I guess post-program investment that not a lot of programs have. That $1,000 donation is going to help a young person build their emotional literacy, self-awareness, and their mental clarity, something that they don't feel that they can achieve right now, but with it becomes the foundations of what can come thereafter. So With $1,000, we could do that. With $2,000, we could run our full programs. But any other corporate and charitable minded partner that I would encourage donors to come and see what we do first. The more that they explore and take the time to see that there's more to the rhetoric, the more confident they can be in the work that we do. And I know they would be once they did.
Well, as you know, there are so many mental health and youth programs out there. What makes Breed truly different?
I guess the question of what makes Breed's programs truly different, and yes, you're right, there are a lot of mental health and youth programs out there. From a mental health point of view, and we need to acknowledge this, that naturally that there will be clinical support needs out there, whether that's through psychologists, counsellors, youth workers, social workers. They're the programs when the crisis has hit. Our programs work because we're identifying and this is my personal reflections. When I look at our programs and the young people that I've either worked with or observed, they're on the verge of feeling as though they've been written off by others and most critically by themselves. They're at that precipice where they're feeling so overwhelmed, the pressure to keep up, to never mess up, to always be okay is starting to break them. And they're not going to speak it. They're not even going to be able to articulate it that way because often you don't know what you don't know. You might be feeling certain things, but you can't necessarily express them or understand them yourselves. What I've seen is we've had young people come through that have almost stopped and given up. We're early intervention. So we're identifying those people that feel they're being written off, starting to write themselves off. And we don't see the deficits. We see their potential because we spend the first periods of every single program we have unlocking it. And we won't progress them forward until we have. That's why young people respond. And we've got a lot of stories to tell about that transformation. Because without that framing of conversation, without giving them the tools to understand themselves and improve their self-awareness, they're still going to see their deficits. And it's our job to unlock their potential. And once you unlock the mindset and the self-belief in a meaningful way, in a way that challenges their current way of thinking, you're going to make progress. That's what makes our program different. And it sounds very simplistic and it sounds easy to do. It's not. But what we do is take the time and attention and focus to start to do those kind of things before we do anything else. What I've observed is a lot of other programs will attempt to do that. But there's just simply not enough of it. There's not enough of that emphasis. It's all about the goal setting and the goal achievement, not building the foundation. So we're reverse engineering programs here at Breed Australia because we realise the mental health epidemic is so great and that those foundations are they're built on sand at the moment. And that's what we're hearing from young people. We're hearing from it in what they might express, but we're seeing it in their mannerisms. We're seeing it in the way that they isolate themselves. We're seeing it in the way that they rely on social media, and that's the beacon and the gauge of which they measure themselves. We get to them by talking to them in a way that's going to improve their self-awareness and the ability to start transforming in a positive way and with good habits to do so. Only then can you achieve goals and purposes and become more focused. And once you become more focused, you're on the right track, or we believe you are.
When you look at this year's results, what gives you the most hope?
What gives me most hope is that the more attention that's given to people and young people with this structure or this framework that we call Learning for Good, the more we're seeing personal breakthroughs. We're seeing results. We're seeing those transformations. We're seeing people that couldn't get out of bed, who, as we said, had almost given up, struggle with the comparison, and then just feel that they'll never be able to be seen or heard because they're compared. They're always focused on their failures. So we're seeing that our interventions at this critical point are working, particularly around the emotional regulation and the connection, the ability to connect with people at our organisation, to connect with other young people and have these same conversations so they don't feel alone, is giving me real hope that if we can showcase more of our work and the good things we're doing, the more likely are we going to receive further support. The penultimate outcome of Breed Australia is to create a movement of young people who have been through our programs, support our programs, but invest in it to pass it on to other young people and young people of future generations. And finally, because we're a mindset first alternative education provider, we've got the best chance of addressing some of those statistics I spoke about at the outset.
Before we wrap up, if our listeners could only take one thing away, what would you hope it be?
I hope our listeners, and I appreciate their time in learning more about our organisation. If I could have them take away one thing, it's to put themselves in the shoes of a young person, put themselves in the shoes of a young person when most likely they were a young person, and realise how much society has changed, to better understand why they might feel the way they do. I then want them to think about what our programs are about, and I hope I've articulated in a way, what our programs look like, why the mindset piece is our foundation that we call Learning for Good, and how that's actually going to make a difference, because it's not just the current predicament of mental challenges at 16 and 24. It's likely to happen again later in life, and we're building techniques for them to use now for the present and the future. I also want them to think about it from the lens of the people in their inner circle, their own children, their grandchildren, any young person that they're connecting with, even at work. I want them to check in on them. I want them to identify the signs and realise the statistics are real. 26% experienced mental health challenges in 2007. Now it's 40%. We know that young people are experiencing mental health challenges earlier than ever in modern history. So something is definitely happening. And so if they start to think about those few things and recognise that the programs at Breed Australia are producing outcomes, can deliver hope, can shift the mental health crisis that young people are experiencing, then they're going to think very carefully and seriously about the work we do and find a way to be involved. We welcome that because we know what we're doing is already having a difference, and it's only having a difference with a few, and I am certain it can have a difference for many more.
Amazing. Nathan, thank you for such an insightful conversation.
Thank you, Serge. It's been a pleasure and I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Thank you. If today's episode resonated with you, whether you're a potential donor, partner, or someone who simply believes in building strength before crisis, we encourage you to click the link below for more information. Thank you.